So, Friedrich Nietzsche. Just hearing the name can be a little intimidating, right? He's known as one of the most difficult, most misunderstood writers in all of philosophy. And today, we're going to dive into exactly why he wrote the way he did, why reading him feels like a workout for your brain. I mean, you've heard this a million times, right? It's in pop songs, it's in movies. But where did it come from? Yep, pure, uncut Nietzsche. Okay, but here's the thing with Nietzsche. What you see on the surface is almost never the whole story. His style? It's intentionally complicated. See, for him, how he says something is every bit as important as what he's saying. It's like, to really get his philosophy, you have to first crack the code of his writing. All right, so let's do just that. We're going to take this one super famous line, put it right under the microscope, and see what happens. Because by unpacking just this one quote, we can start to see the blueprint for his entire way of thinking. So first things first, we almost always hear only the second half of that quote. The full line actually starts with this: out of life's school of war. And wow, that one phrase completely changes the meaning, doesn't it? Suddenly it's not some cheerful, feel-good saying. It's a gritty statement made from the middle of a battlefield. And from there, this one little idea just explodes into all these different, sometimes even contradictory meanings. Is it about personal growth through struggle? Or is it about becoming hardened, kind of building up emotional armor? Is it something you use as a weapon, or maybe a shield to protect yourself? The thing is, Nietzsche never tells you which one is right. He just lights the fuse, walks away, and leaves us to figure it out, to grapple with all the possibilities. And that right there, that is the key to his whole method. See, he wasn't trying to just hand you a perfectly wrapped, finished argument on a silver platter. No way. He wanted to give you the experience of thinking itself. All of it. The messy parts, the detours, even the dead ends. I mean, just look at the contrast. A lot of traditional philosophy is set up like a geometry proof, right? It's all neat, logical, and leads to this final conclusion. QED, done. But Nietzsche? His philosophy is way more like music or art. It's all about that messy, emotional process. He even talked about writing his books with a certain rhythm, a tempo, sometimes slow and careful, other times just a flat-out gallop. He wants you to feel that journey, not just skip to the end. And his favorite tool for doing this was the aphorism. He gives you these brilliant little peaks, these mountaintops of ideas, but then he demands that you do the hard climbing to connect them through the valleys. He wasn't looking for followers who would just nod along. He wanted active partners, companions in the act of thinking. So this whole method, leaving gaps, forcing you to interpret, it's all building towards his most explosive idea, and that is his full-on assault on the very concept of a single objective truth. Okay, so take his book Daybreak, for example. For the first few pages, he's just talking about societal customs, habits. He's writing almost like an anthropologist, just observing how different groups of people do things. Then, boom, out of nowhere, he completely switches gears. No transition, no warning. He just pivots from talking about everyday customs to this huge, heavy topic, morality. But that jarring shift, that's the whole point. He's being deliberately sneaky. The connection he wants you to make in your own head is that maybe, just maybe, our most deeply held morality isn't some universal absolute truth. Maybe it's just a really, really old custom, a habit. And of course, habits can be broken. And this leads to one of his most radical ideas. If truth is basically just a well-established habit, then what is philosophy? Well, it's not a science that just discovers facts. Instead, he says it's an art. The art of rhetoric. It's about persuading people, about convincing them of a certain viewpoint. So it's less about cold, hard logic, and way more about making you feel the power of an idea. Okay, so if philosophy is just art and persuasion, and if there's no such thing as capital T truth, well, that brings up a really fascinating paradox when it comes to Nietzsche himself. And here it is. For a guy who is constantly tearing down the idea of truth, he was a massive fan of science. I mean, he read scientific literature all the time and even thought of his own work as being scientific. So what gives? How does that work? Well, it turns out he didn't love science for its conclusions or its facts. He loved it for its method. And there were three big reasons why. First, it's experimental. It has the guts to just say, hey, let's try this, and to challenge old dusty ideas. Second, it's naturalistic. It looks for explanations right here in the real physical world, not in some supernatural realm.
And third, and this is the big one, it's non-dogmatic. A good scientist is always ready for their best theory to be proven wrong tomorrow. Nothing is sacred.
And that was exactly what he wanted to do for philosophy. His goal was to inject that same experimental, non-dogmatic spirit right into the heart of philosophy. He wanted philosophers to stop acting like they had all the final answers and instead turn philosophy into a kind of laboratory, a place to explore new possibilities and try on new interpretations. Which brings us all the way back to the beginning. It brings us to the final takeaway, why reading Nietzsche is supposed to be so hard, and why that difficulty is actually the whole point. You see, his challenging style, it's not a bug, it's a feature. He's not trying to lecture you from some high and mighty podium. He's sending you an invitation to jump in, to argue with him, to wrestle with the ideas, and to become a real companion on this journey of thought. He forces you to be the one who connects the dots, who fills in those valleys between his mountaintops. He makes you do the heavy lifting, intellectually speaking. Why? Because for Nietzsche, that struggle, that effort, that is precisely what makes you stronger. So in the end, the real question his work leaves you with isn't, do I agree with Nietzsche? The real question is, am I willing to take on the climb? Are you ready for the demanding intellectual journey he's proposing? Because it's a challenge not just to what you think, but to the very way you think and read.